All right, so get this. We're diving into the world of animation today, the stuff that brings our favorite characters and stories to life on screen. Ever just find yourself like completely glued to the screen during a crazy realistic fight scene or amazed by how fluidly a video game character moves?
Yeah, it really makes you appreciate the artistry and skill behind it all.
Absolutely. It's mind-blowing how much work goes into creating those moments, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're going to zero in on three animation techniques you see all the time: motion capture, motion tweening, and stop frame animation.
And you'd be surprised at just how much detail and thought go into each one.
Oh, for sure. All right, so first up, motion capture, or Mocap for short. This is the technique that brings such a level of realism that you almost forget you're walking animation.
Right, like it tricks your brain into thinking it's real.
Exactly, like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. That insane level of detail, those subtle little twitches, the expressions, it's crazy. How do they do it?
Well, it's all about capturing the nuances of human movement. Actors wear these suits covered in sensors, and every time they move, the sensors record every single shift in their body, every tiny muscle movement, even their eye movements. Then all that data is basically translated into digital information that can be applied to a 3D character.
So it's like the actor is puppeteering a digital character.
Yeah, in a way. But it's much more complex than just a one-to-one mapping. Think about it. Our brains are hardwired to pick up on those tiny details of how humans move, like the subtle shifts in weight, the way our muscles tense and relax. Motion captures all those details, which is why it feels so real.
Ah, so that's the secret ingredient. Like our brains are subconsciously registering all those little movements, and that's what makes it feel so real.
Precisely. And for animators, this is a complete game changer. It provides this foundation for incredibly lifelike movement, so they can then focus on perfecting the performance and adding those finishing touches.
I bet it saves a ton of time too, right? Especially with complex scenes or a ton of characters.
Absolutely. Instead of animating every single frame by hand, they can use mocap data as a starting point, which really speeds up the process.
That makes sense. But I'm sure there's some limitations, right? Like those suits can't capture everything, can they?
You're absolutely right. There are definitely challenges. Some movements are just notoriously difficult to capture accurately, like super fast-paced action, really intricate finger movements, or even subtle facial expressions. It's this constant balance between what the technology can do and what the animator wants to achieve.
So even with mocap, animators still have a good amount of creative control.
Absolutely. Motion capture provides the raw materials, but it's the animator who shapes those materials into a believable performance. They add the personality, the emotion, all those little details that make a character come alive.
That's so cool. It's a true partnership between technology and art. Okay, so we've talked about how motion capture brings that realism to the screen, but what about those really sleek, smooth animations we see online? Like websites with those cool transitions and effects. What's the magic behind those?
That's where motion tweening steps in. It's a totally different approach, and it relies on the idea of keyframes. Picture a flipbook, right? Instead of drawing on every single page, you only draw the most important ones, the key poses. Then the computer steps in and fills in the gaps, creating all those in-between frames that smooth out the animation.
So the computer is like a digital artist connecting the dots between those key poses.
Exactly. And that's what makes motion tweening so efficient, especially for web design, where file sizes and loading times are super important. It's way faster than traditional frame-by-frame animation, and you end up with smaller files, so it's perfect for online stuff.
It's like the fast food of animation, quick, efficient, gets the job done. But I'm guessing there are trade-offs, right?
Of course, while it's great for simpler animations, it can sometimes lack that natural, organic feel. Since the computer is basically guessing at those in-between frames, the movement can sometimes look a bit robotic or mechanical if the keyframes aren't placed carefully.
I can see that. Kind of like those old school video game characters. You know they're moving, but it doesn't always look natural.
Right. But it's important to remember every technique has its strengths and its weaknesses. Motion tweening is awesome for creating smooth transitions and cool visual effects, but it's probably not the best choice for a really complex character animation where you need a lot of nuance and fluidity.
Okay, that makes sense. So motion capture is all about realism, motion tweening is about efficiency, but what about that handcrafted charm? You know those stop motion films that just feel so unique and tactile?
You're talking about stop frame animation, one of the oldest and most painstaking animation techniques. It's all about breathing life into physical objects frame by frame.
It's like giving inanimate objects a soul. Think about Wallace and Gromit or The Nightmare Before Christmas. You can almost feel the animator's touch in every frame.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so special. With stop frame animation, you're dealing with real materials, clay, puppets, even everyday objects. You physically manipulate them, snap a picture, move them a little, take another picture, and so on. Then when you play those pictures back in sequence, it creates that illusion of movement.
That sounds incredibly time-consuming. I mean, how much patience do you need to move a character like a millimeter at a time, taking hundreds of pictures just to get a few seconds of animation?
It's definitely a labor of love. Stop-motion animators are incredibly dedicated and meticulous. They have to be. Imagine building elaborate sets, crafting these detailed characters, and then painstakingly moving them frame by frame. It's a real testament to their artistry and patience.
I can only imagine the amount of detail they put into each frame.
It's pretty amazing. And they have complete control over every single aspect of the animation, the movement, the lighting, the texture of the materials. That level of control allows them to create truly unique and expressive animations.
But it must be super challenging, too. I mean, one wrong move and you have to start the whole shot over again, right?
Absolutely. Stop frame animation is a really delicate process. Sets can fall over, characters can break, even a tiny tremor can mess up a shot. It's like a constant battle against the elements, but the results can be incredibly rewarding.
It's like this delicate dance between the animator and the physical world. Okay, so we've got motion capture for realism, motion tweening for efficiency, and stop frame animation for that handcrafted charm. Each technique with its own unique strength and weaknesses.
That's right. And understanding those differences is key to appreciating the artistry and skill that go into the animations we see all around us.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of animation.
We've covered a lot of ground so far.
Yeah, in part one, we got up close and personal with motion capture, motion tweening, and stop frame animation.
We saw how each one brings its own unique style to the screen, from the realism of mocap to the handmade feel of stop motion.
Definitely. And now I'm kind of curious about how these techniques have evolved over time. It's not like they just appeared out of nowhere.
Right, there's a whole history behind them.
So let's fire up the time machine and journey back to the roots of animation. Where do we even begin?
Well, to understand animation, you got to understand the desire to bring still images to life.
Okay, makes sense.
And that takes us back to the late 19th century when people were fascinated by devices like the magic lantern.
The magic lantern, was that like an early projector or something?
Exactly. It projected images that were painted on glass slides, and it created this sense of movement and spectacle.
That's so cool. I can imagine people back then being totally blown away by it.
Oh yeah, it must have felt like magic.
But projecting still images is one thing. How did they actually create the illusion of movement?
That's where things get really interesting. In the early 19th century, inventors were playing around with devices like the phenakistoscope and the zoetrope.
Those names sound like they're straight out of a science fiction novel.
They were pretty ingenious for their time. The phenakistoscope used a spinning disc with a series of images drawn around the center. And when you spun the disc and looked through a slit, the images appeared to move.
Oh, I've seen those. It's like a flip book on a wheel.
Exactly. And the zoetrope was similar. It used a cylinder with slits and a strip of images inside. As the cylinder spun, you'd see a moving picture through the slits. These early inventions were like the building blocks of animation.
Like the first baby steps.
Right. They proved that you could create the illusion of movement by showing a sequence of still images really quickly.
So when did animation really take off? When did it become more than just a novelty?
That brings us to the early 20th century. Pioneers like Winsor McCay were really pushing the limits of what animation could do.
Winsor McCay, that name sounds familiar. Didn't he create Gertie the dinosaur?
He did. And it was groundbreaking. McCay was an amazing artist, and he hand-drew thousands of individual drawings to bring Gertie to life.
I've seen clips of that film. It's incredible how much personality Gertie has. You can tell McCay put his heart and soul into it.
He definitely did. And his work wasn't just about technical skill. He was a storyteller. He used animation to create characters, evoke emotions, and take audiences to new worlds. His films were like animated plays full of humor, drama, and imagination.
So he wasn't just animating images, he was animating stories.
Exactly. And that's what set the stage for the golden age of animation.
Yes, the golden age.
And speaking of the golden age, we can't forget those iconic studios that really shaped the world of animation. Disney, Warner Bros., Fleischer Studios.
The titans of animation. They gave us Mickey Mouse, Bugs, Bunny, Betty Boop characters that are known all over the world.
These studios didn't just create characters, they created entire worlds. They introduced synchronized sound to animation, brought us vibrant colors, and developed sophisticated storytelling
And they
techniques,
were constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
both creatively and technically.
And I think one of the biggest breakthroughs during that time was cell animation, right?
Absolutely. Cell animation, short for celluloid animation, was a game changer. Instead of drawing on paper, animators started drawing characters on these transparent sheets of celluloid called cells.
Okay.
And these cells could then be layered over static backgrounds.
Ah, so they could reuse backgrounds and just animate the characters on top.
Right, exactly. It was a brilliant innovation that made the whole process much more efficient.
And it allowed for more fluid movement and detail, right?
It did, and it also made it easier to divide the work among different artists. You could have specialists for backgrounds, characters, special effects. It became a real collaborative effort.
That's amazing. And the results speak for themselves. Think about those classic Disney films, Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia. The detail is incredible, and the characters are so expressive. Cell animation really took things to another level.
It did. And while those studios were thriving in the West, a different style of animation was developing on the other side of the globe. Japanese animation or anime.
Anime. Now that's a whole world in itself. Those unique character designs, the epic storylines, the action sequences that defy physics, it's unlike anything else.
Anime emerged in the early 20th century, and it quickly developed its own visual style and storytelling conventions. It explored themes and genres that you didn't really see in Western animation.
And it's gained this huge global following.
It's like a window into a different culture, a different way of seeing things.
And you can definitely see its influence in animation today.
From character design to storytelling techniques, it really shows how animation can transcend borders and connect people from all over the world.
It's amazing how far animation has come. From those early flickering images to hand-drawn masterpieces to the global phenomenon of anime. But what about the digital revolution? When did computers enter the picture?
That's where things really start to shift again. The arrival of computer-generated imagery, or CGI, marked a whole new era in animation.
CGI. Now that was a game changer. I remember seeing Toy Story for the first time. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Those characters looked so real.
Toy Story was a landmark film. It was the first fully CGI feature film, and it proved that computers could create worlds and characters that were just as believable and engaging as traditional animation.
And Pixar, the studio behind Toy Story, really revolutionized the way we think about animation. Their films are not just visually impressive, they're stories that really resonate with audiences.
They've definitely mastered the art of storytelling through CGI. And with CGI, the possibilities are endless. You can create anything you can imagine, fantastical creatures, underwater cities, entire galaxies. And it's all done with a level of detail and realism that you just couldn't achieve with traditional techniques.
It's like they've unleashed the animator's imagination.
Exactly.
But with all these advancements in technology, did traditional animation just disappear?
Not at all. In fact, we're seeing a really interesting blend of traditional and digital techniques in animation today.
So it's not an either-or situation, it's more like a fusion of different approaches.
All right, animators are combining hand-drawn elements with CGI, blending stop motion with digital effects using motion capture to enhance character animation. The lines are getting blurred, and it's leading to some really innovative and visually stunning work.
It's like a melting pot of creativity where anything goes.
And the best part is that animation isn't just limited to movies anymore. We see amazing animation in TV shows, video games, commercials, educational content, virtual reality experiences. It's everywhere.
It's become such an important part of how we consume information and experience the world.
Exactly. And as we look back on this journey through the evolution of animation, it's clear that this art form is always pushing boundaries and reinventing itself.
It really speaks to the power of human creativity and our desire to tell stories no matter the medium. And on that note, I think it's time to move on to part 3.
In part 3, we'll shift our focus to the future of animation and explore the new trends and technologies that are shaping this dynamic and constantly evolving art form.
Welcome back. We've explored all these different animation techniques. We've journeyed through the history of animation from those early, flickering images to the CGI we see now. And now it's time to look ahead, right? Like peek into the future.
Future animation is really exciting. It's full of potential. With all these new technologies popping up all the time, it's really shaking things up in terms of how stories are told, how experiences are created.
Yeah, it feels like we're standing at the edge of a whole new world. I mean, what trends are you really keeping your eye on?
Well, one of the most talked about things lately is the role of AI.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence in animation.
AI.
Yeah. AI algorithms are getting so sophisticated they can generate animation sequences, create characters, even mimic different animation styles.
Wow, AI animating entire sequences. That's pretty mind-blowing and kind of intimidating at the same time. Does that mean human animators are going to be like, replaced by robots?
Not exactly. AI is a really powerful tool, but it's still just a tool. It needs human input, guidance, and creativity to really work its magic. Think of it more as a collaboration.
So AI is more likely to become like a partner in the creative process.
Yeah, exactly. AI can handle those more tedious, repetitive tasks,
Yeah.
like in-betweening or generating backgrounds, freeing up human animators to focus on the parts that need creativity storytelling, those emotional nuances.
That makes sense. It's like having a super efficient assistant who can take care of the boring stuff and let the artists focus on the heart of the animation. What other advancements are out there?
Another game changer is virtual production. It's blurring the lines between animation and live-action filmmaking in some really cool ways.
I've heard about virtual production, but I'm still not entirely sure what it is.
Imagine filming a movie inside a video game engine.
Okay.
That's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
It uses real-time game engines and massive LED walls to create immersive environments that actors can interact with while filming.
So instead of building physical sets, they're creating digital worlds that react to the camera and the actors.
You got it. It allows filmmakers to create these amazing settings, impossible camera shots, even like otherworldly creatures, all in real time.
That's insane. It opens up a whole new world of creative possibilities. And I bet it saves a ton of time and money compared to building those huge sets.
It does. And it gives filmmakers a crazy level of control over the environment, something that was unimaginable before.
So we have AI helping out in the animation process and virtual production, blurring the lines between animation and live action.
Hmm.
What about the audience? How are these advancements changing the way we experience animation?
Well, one of the biggest trends is this rise of immersive storytelling, where the audience isn't just watching a story, but actually participating in it.
Participating in the story, how does that even work?
Technologies like VR and AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, are allowing creators to make experiences that engage multiple senses, immersing the viewer in the story world. Imagine putting on a VR headset, and suddenly you're inside your favorite animated film. You can interact with the characters, even influence the story.
That would be amazing. It's like stepping through the screen and becoming part of the story.
Exactly, and it's not just for entertainment. Immersive storytelling has huge potential in education training, even healthcare.
It's like the future of storytelling is right here, right now. But are there any downsides to all, anything we should be thinking about?
Of course. With any new technology, there are ethical considerations.
Like what?
Well, as AI gets more advanced, we need to think about things like bias in algorithms and the possibility of misuse. And with immersive technologies, there are concerns about privacy and that blurring of lines between what's real and what's virtual.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. We need to be careful about the consequences as we embrace these advancements.
Absolutely. It's crucial to talk openly and honestly about the ethical implications of these technologies and to make sure they're developed and used responsibly.
Yeah, it's like we're exploring uncharted territory here. The future of animation is so full of potential, but it's up to us to shape that future in a way that benefits everyone.
I agree. And with all the technological stuff happening, it's important to remember what's at the heart of animation, those core principles. Creativity, storytelling, and connecting with audiences on an emotional level.
Those never go out of style, no matter how technology changes. The magic of animation is in its power to take us to other worlds, to make us laugh, to make us cry, to ultimately make us feel something.
Well said.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of animation, I'm really excited about what's coming next.
Me too. Who knows what amazing innovations and stories are waiting for us. The future of animation is bright, and I can't wait to see what it becomes.
And to everyone listening out there, we hope this deep dive has made you curious about the magic of animation. Keep exploring, keep learning, and let those imaginations run wild because the future of animation is in your hands.